All right, has it been long enough? Can we talk about Logan? Alright, so the movie's been out for a while, and it has still been one of the most critically acclaimed movies in the box office right now. We're going to talk about Logan today. Hugh Jackman's final run as the titular character that we've all come to know and love, even though he's almost nothing like his comic book counterpart. It's also the last time that Patrick Stewart will be playing Professor Xavier, a role that he was basically born to play. It's not to diminish his entire career, a tip of the hat to Captain Picard, and I'm sure he does a great Shakespeare, but good God, he is a great Professor X. Now, I'm going to talk about this movie in two different ways. One of them is as a standalone movie that exists in its own universe with none of the other events of the X-Men movies having happened. And then again, how Logan fits into that sort of overall timeline. And I want to talk about Logan as a standalone movie first, because I don't want to be overly negative about this. Logan, as its own movie, as its own separate entity, is a really well done and fun movie. It has amazing action. X-23 was definitely a highlight for me. I could do 3 or 4 movies in a row that were just about her. She's a little buzzsaw and a super cool character. And I've come to like Hugh Jackman as Wolverine over the years. This was a good send-off for him. It is one of, if not the most emotionally compelling comic book movie I think I've ever seen, and definitely pulls at the heartstrings. I can't count how many times Bria started crying during it. And while it can get a little saccharine, I think that most of the emotional impact is felt and deserved. Now, that said, I don't want to look at the X-Men movie timelines as sacrosanct because they've been all over the place. They contradict themselves quite a bit. And it's not like it's a well-oiled machine. X3, basically gave us the whole new run of X-Men movies just to get to a point where we could try and wipe that out of continuity. So it's not like everyone has been a home run swing from what Fox Studios is doing with the X-Men films. That said, this being Hugh Jackman's last supposed Wolverine appearance, unless, of course, he does end up popping up in Deadpool 2, or somehow Fox and Marvel can work it out and Wolverine can become an Avenger, because Hugh Jackman said he'd come back for that, we can basically expect, it's kind of like Kiss breaking up. This is the last farewell tour until the next one. So, it worked well for that, but I didn't necessarily like quite a few things about this film. And if you haven't picked up by now, there are going to be spoilers. If you're watching this and you haven't seen the movie yet, that's on you. You should probably go see the movie. I mean, I guess sitting at home and watching YouTube is free, especially if you steal internet from somebody. But see the movie. Don't watch reviews. Formulate your own opinion. What the hell do I know? This film, as it stands in the overall X-Men universe, kind of bothered me because it distills a lot of the entire story of what Charles Xavier has tried to do down to Logan. Now, it's very loosely based on the Old Man Logan comic. Basically, the only similarities being that there aren't any mutants anymore, and that Logan is old and kind of beaten down. Now, while I did really enjoy the Old Man Logan comic, I can see, of course, with different movie rights, you can't make that film. And like I said, other than that there really aren't any other mutants and Logan is old, that's where the similarities end. In the comic, there aren't any more mutants, basically because Logan killed them all. And that's why he hasn't popped his claws in years and years and lives his life as a farmer and a relative pacifist. In this film, it's because of something that happened with Charles Xavier. And I understand for a narrative reason why they would do that. Charles Xavier being one of the most powerful minds on the planet, as his mind, he ages and his mind starts to weaken or, whatever neurological disease sets in with him, that does make him potentially exceptionally dangerous. And one of the high points of the movie to me really was the relationship between Hugh Jackman's Wolverine and Charles Xavier. It is really touching. There's a great kind of father-son dynamic that really work well together. But that said, I didn't really like... It's a Wolverine movie. It's a standalone Wolverine movie. You know, there's going to be some Jackman worship, and I get that. But I didn't like how much it took the whole idea of the X-Men and sort of swept it under the rug. You know, Jackman actually chastises some kids for reading X-Men comics, which were supposedly based on some of the greatest events that they did, or were extrapolated that they did throughout the years. And one of the things that always really brought me into X-Men that I really enjoyed was they were the outsiders. Charles Xavier and Magneto, why they never saw eye to eye was, of course, because Charles was always infinite patience. Even though they hate us, we will show them the way, we will save them, we will protect them. Whereas Magneto is like, humans are beneath us, you know, screw them, mutants are the future. And the comics, to me, were always really a lot of Charles's acceptance, being that outsider, being that other, and saying, regardless of what you label me, how you think of me, I won't fall into that role. I will be above it, and I will help you when I can, you know, because we're all one, we're all for the greater good. And that's always been one of the most poignant aspects of the X-Men narrative that's really resonated with me. In this one, that's really gone. You know, the idea of the X-Men are sort of reduced to this idea, you know, this nebulous, yeah, we did some stuff once, it probably wasn't as great as the comics these kids are reading that were made up for the movie made it out to be. It was a dream, the dream's over. And that was one of the first things that really stuck into my craw. Just sweeping the life's work of Charles Xavier under the rug sort of bothered me, and I'll get back to that here towards the end. Another big thing was Logan not having his healing factor in full effect. In fact, it's quite arrested, and throughout the comics, there have been a litany of reasons why Wolverine has lost his healing factor. Hell, even in the last standalone Wolverine movie, basically some weird little Matrix robot bug was attached to his heart, and that mitigated his healing factor. So it's not like it hasn't happened before. And I could have dealt with that in this movie if it wasn't for another little bit of lazy storytelling. They explain it that basically he has adamantium poisoning. The unbreakable metal that's over his bones, it's been coating his bones since the 70s, has slowly been poisoning him. And while there is examples throughout history of, you know, people having implants and them slowly corroding over time, Matt Patton, Film Theory, has a great video about that. I didn't necessarily agree with that, because with the X-Men you're not dealing with the natural, you're dealing with the supernatural. And one of the first things you learn in science is you can't quantify the supernatural. Now, while Matt Patton, Film Theory extrapolate that it's actually cellular division and DNA replication issues that'll eventually arrest his mutant healing ability, again, the natural can't be explained in a realm of supernatural. You look at Cyclops, another big mutant in the X-Men. He doesn't really shoot lasers out of his eyes so much as his eyes are a dimensional portal and he fires that energy out of them that he can't control. I really don't think you can go to your optometrist and they can get you a pair of ruby quartz glasses to deal with that. So if we're already living in that universe, it seems a little bit sloppy to me to just say, oh yeah, the metal in his bones, it's hurting him, it's killing him. He no longer has his healing factor. That was one of the first things that kind of gave me a swerve on this one. Honestly, what I would have liked to have seen, you know, they've got the overall super big bad villain that's growing these mutant kids. And they also, and albeit exceptionally briefly, talk about how he controls a lot of the food supply. And he's been putting additives in food that arrest the mutagenic process. That right there you could have used. You never see Logan being selective about what he eats, what he drinks, anything like that. It could be that even though he already has his mutation, it's constantly imbibing these things that are designed to arrest mutation that are potentially wearing him down. That could give him a more personal connection with this overall villain, other than the fact that, oh yeah, he's growing these mutant kids in a lab to weaponize them. Just seemed like a missed opportunity, and one that did kind of take me out of it. Also, Charles being the one to kill the X-Men. Now, thematically, I get that. You know, he's one of the most powerful minds on the planet, and his mind is an exceptionally powerful weapon. As it denigrates with old age, or, you know, he succumbs to some sort of degenerative neurological disease, potentially he could be a huge weapon. But him being the one to kill the X-Men and then just sort of live in this coma-induced state because Logan loves him but doesn't know what to do with him, it seemed to me like that was just another opportunity to make you cry because an old man was sad. I'm not saying that it was my least favorite point of the movie, but again, the X-Men was always Charles's altruism against all things. The X-Men were how he dealt with an imperfect world. And I don't know. I can't argue that one is hard versus The Choice. It just seemed, it wasn't a direction I would have gone in. I would have liked to see a bit of redemption for Charles, being that none of these movies would have existed without him. None of the X-Men mythos would have existed without him. And for him to be killed off in the movie, never having redemption for what's happened, and to be sort of this impotent kind of scapegoat character that has to be hidden from his own ideas, or his own past, I'm sorry. I understand that probably it deals with the concept of, you know, as your parents grow older and they go from being your caregiver to now a care receiver position, as their life, you know, moves towards close. I can see that. But again, these are superhero action movies. I want a little bit of justification or redemption for the characters I love. Now, here's one of my last big problems with it, and it's X-24. X-24 ends up being kind of the big bad super mutant that they built from the ground up. They'd been cloning these kids to, you know, try and weaponize mutations, and then they said, you know what, these kids are too unpredictable, let's kill them off, and we'll make our own. Somehow we'll grow them just by arms and legs, and then stick them all together. Could be cool, and could have been a great opportunity for a fantastic Logan villain like maybe Omega Red. I don't know. Instead, it's not gray hair, slightly younger looking Hugh Jackman's Wolverine. I honestly almost laughed when they released the Ultimate Weapon and it's just Wolverine. That to me was probably the most ultimately lazy point of the movie. Now, if somehow there would have been something that happened that Wolverine got, the traditional Wolverine, Weapon X, Hugh Jackman got his full healing factor back, and we were able to see a balls out, two indestructible immortals going after each other that are ostensibly the same person, yes, I'm down with that. That would have been cool as hell. But we don't get that. We get old, beaten down, I'm too old for this shit, Hugh Jackman Wolverine, versus a younger, better version of himself. And I didn't get that. Yeah, they had some cool fights and they really tore the hell out of one another. But it just seemed lazy. Like, okay, we've already got Hugh Jackman in this, let's put him in multiple roles. If you're giving me Wolverine versus Wolverine, and fortunately, unlike in the comics this time, it wasn't a stupid robot, let me have Wolverine versus Wolverine. Full feral berserker, going after one another, collateral damage for days, town's decimated, you know. Give me a 20-minute fight scene of just them tearing each other apart, fighting either till a standstill or, you know, hopefully because Hugh Jackman actually, or Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, Weapon X, actually has his mind in facilities and isn't just some kind of controlled clone, can get the upper hand and win. That would have been fantastic. I didn't get that. What I got was X-23 using an adamantium-coated bullet that Wolverine kept around just in case he ever needed to blow his head off, to blow X-24's head off. And question, X-24 isn't dead. I guess it's not so much of a question as a statement. We've seen Wolverine receive multiple adamantium-coated bullets to his cranium. You do see a good portion of X-24's head blow off, but he still has that healing factor. Wolverine's grown back from all sorts of injuries, and it's never been established that just damaging part of his brain would kill him. In fact, it's been established that just damaging part of his brain might only disrupt some memory receptors that a good telepath can fix. So, even though we find Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, Weapon X, dead at the end of this film, don't worry, there's still another crazy Hugh Jackman Wolverine feral out there running through the wilderness after what's left of his head grows back together. So, this is just sort of my overall feelings on it. It was a good film, but to me, the end of Hugh Jackman passing the torch, putting a pin in what was basically the original X-Men series, seemed a little rushed and a little poorly thought out. I got the idea of them wanting to do the Western. When they were watching Shane, I really enjoyed that. You know, Shane's a fun movie. Well, it's not a fun movie, it's a great movie. And I liked the idea of the brutal Western, you know, Wolverine as the gunslinger. But did X-23 really need to just then quote Shane over Wolverine's grave? A little sloppy storytelling. And for what could have been a fantastic movie, kind of a lot of sloppy storytelling. And kind of more reverence for the guy that's been a box office draw that you can tack into every X-Men film just for that cameo, because people want to see how ripped Hugh Jackman's gotten for this one, rather than reverence for everything that came before it. The work that the X-Men did, the work that Professor Xavier's done, and even the great villains like, you know, Magneto. Sure, the X-Men films got a little campy, they got a little bit stupid, and I think that they've done a better job overall with the First Class style reboot. But it could have been more of a film. It could have been a little less fan service, a little more of the Ronin tale, which definitely would have fit the character. And we still could have had the passing of the torch. Even when Logan is helping the kids, you know, going to get them across the Canadian border, he still complains about it. There's never the redemption. And what I mentioned earlier with his relationship with Professor Xavier, of course Logan dies at the end, and in this one he basically had to. Now, while these kids are going to this nebulous thing in Canada, and there are fan theories, whether it's Emma Frost or whether it's, you know, another version of the Alkali Lake Lab just lying to them, I kind of would have liked to see, Logan pick up the mantle of Charles Xavier. He was always Charles' most reluctant student. He never really wanted to be part of the X-Men. He understood the fight, but didn't understand the battle. And given that we see Charles Xavier die without redemption, rather than putting that final nail in Wolverine's coffin, not to say that X-23 turning the cross into an X wasn't one of my favorite parts of the film, but to have him finally, after begrudgingly helping these kids, seeing one of his oldest and best friends die, say, you know what, Charles, I finally get it. I believe in your dream. I'm going to lead your school. And you don't need to have him in the movies anymore. You know, you don't need Hugh Jackman in any of them. But they're obviously building towards New Mutants. You know, I've heard that X-23 is supposedly supposed to get her own spin-off film. But to have him take on that teacher role, to have him with this storied relationship that a lot of it they built up for this movie, with Charles, him looking after Charles, him finally being the caretaker of his final most important idea, would have been something. Even if he had to die, you know, on his deathbed, rather than the nebulous statement, oh, this is what it feels like. Maybe implore X-23 and the other mutants, you can be better. Don't blame them. You are better. Go forth and carve out a better future for yourselves and for them. They'll hate you for it, but we will all be the better because of it. That's Charles Xavier's legacy, and it would have been nice if there would have been a little more sprinkling of that throughout the final film representation of Patrick Stewart portraying him. So, I hope I wasn't overly negative. I'm sure a lot of you won't agree with me. But if you're going to take some of my favorite characters, put them up on the screen, I'm going to have an opinion about it. So thanks for tuning in. I'll see you in the next one. And if you've watched all this and then haven't seen Logan yet, totally go out and see it right now. Because you will never have a better time. And there needs to be more negative reviews. Like, I Want to Color You, and then you can go on Rotten Tomatoes and be like, this fucking shit. Or don't. I don't know. Maybe go get some breakfast. Who knows what time of day it is. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time.